I'm starting recording now. I'll do a screen share and we'll get straight down to business. So how this works, I'm going to go through the letters one by one. We've got 5. If I've got time, I might do 6. I'll post the corrected letters in the class library on easyclass.com. You can see a link in the channel on Telegram. And I'll post the video, the recording, which I'm making now. I'll post it on my channel on YouTube, so you can access that later when you wish. So now, if you've got any questions, you can either type your question in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I'll turn your microphone on. Then you can ask directly. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's turn that off. Turn screen share on. Okay, can you see this? Can you see the letter? Yeah, you can all see this. Screen share's working. Is it working? Screen share working? Yeah. Well, if it's not working, you'll have to let me know. Okay, so I'll be saving the changes on these letters. So, Amina Ahmed. So first things first, what do? We go to the task at hand. That's the first thing. You are a GP, Dr. Lucy Irving. You have to write a referral letter to registrar of the emergency pediatric unit, okay, to arrange urgent admission to the emergency. So some very good key words there. Urgent, emergency, pediatric unit. Assessment, meningitis, right? So straight to the assessment for you. So let's have a quick look at the case notes. Okay. Age 8, new patient, parents, Somali, Australian. Okay, we don't really need all this. We don't really need this. Now, as you probably know, or you should know, the OET put some case notes in on purpose as a what we would call a distractor to confuse you, to make you include them where they are not relevant or pertinent. So you've got to be a little bit cautious. You've got to be careful. There will be something in the case notes that is not relevant or pertinent, and that's to try and find out if you can spot it or not. So you've got to be careful there. Okay. So let's get straight down to business. Dr. Musa, okay. I'm writing to request your urgent assessment. A management who has been diagnosed with meningococcal meningitis. Okay, good. Urgent assessment. A management. Initially, Amina presented with a mobile symptoms associated with infection, such as fever, nose, marked coughing, from high temperature, from a high so just a viral infection. So I know viral infection is, I would be tempted to put an article in front of that. A singular viral infection, such as fever, runny nose, and mild coughing. Okay, apart from high temperature, I would, again, because it's a noun, a phrase, the keywords are noun, I would be tempted to put an article there. Therefore, she was prescribed paracetamol. Now, you've got to watch this. Therefore means a direct consequence or result of. And sometimes you might want to use the word such subsequently, meaning following afterwards. So we'll see. After 3 days, Amina's condition has deteriorated. Now, right. Now, present perfect wouldn't do. We need past perfect there. After 3 days, because it's not today. So it's still in the past. After 3 days, had deteriorated. So past perfect, not present. Because we've got simple past, she returned, and farther back in time, had deteriorated. Past perfect. Okay? And she returned with a mother with worsened symptoms. Okay, again, it's simple past, coughing, consistent headaches, tiredness, and no appetite. We don't need to include had. The symptoms were a coughing and no appetite. Now, I think you mean upon examination, not upon exemption. I don't think that's the right word at all. Upon examination. Exemption means something else. She was feverish, but there were no rash, but there was no rash. No, rash is singular, but there was no rash or nor neck stiffness. So I would make that was instead of were, but there was no rash, one, or, because we're using or here as a conjunction, there was no rash or neck stiffness. Her mother reported, despite using her paracetamol. Now we usually use reported that, despite using paracetamol, her temperature. Now, right now, you've got to be careful. This is one of those sentences that we call has a dangling participle, because her temperature. Now, I know from the context, it's not referring to her mother's, but according to the structure, the grammar of this particular sentence, it seems that she is reporting about her own, not her daughter's, temperature. Now, I know from the context, we know, but from the structure of this particular sentence, it looks as if the mother is reporting her temperature, but it's her daughter's. So to avoid this, right, make it Amina's. So it's crystal clear whose temperature was not controlled. With this in mind, good expression, I prescribed her brufen and ordered full blood count, a full blood count, and urine function report. Don't forget your articles, because blood account, it's a noun, it's a proper name, so we need an article or a pronoun. Order a full blood count and urine function. Who's writing on the screen? Don't need that. Okay. On review today. Now, okay. Became, now this implies that while she was in the examination room, she became lethargic. Now, that could be the case, but I think it's more likely that when she came, she was already lethargic. So let me check the case notes, because if you are using this, it means that she started or became lethargic on review. But I think she was lethargic before, and she came to the examination room and you saw that she was lethargic, which is not the same thing. Where's today's reported? Yeah. So she must have been lethargic before. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about, right? We've got to change that. So instead of became, make it was. Vomited twice last night and has developed persistent headaches. Has developed and had developed persistent headaches. On examinations, the febrile pulse rate, legs and neck, stiffness was present. Penicillin intravenously was commenced. Bit awkward. Penicillin intravenously was commenced. Okay. Therefore, I commenced intravenous. Yeah, you can use it, but that's a little bit formal. Based on the above, I believe she needs urgent admission and management. Well, you believe so, but you want them to accept her. So based on the above, I request You know, make it clear what you want them to do, because this is just a statement. In strict terms of English, this is simply a statement. I believe that, etc. Okay, but that's not the same as a request. It's not the same as, you know, asking, can you admit this person, which would be, in functional terms, a request. So that's not the same. If we look at the, yeah, look, request your urgent assessment. So I am requesting her urgent admission. That is better. In strict terms of vocabulary, that's better than saying I believe. I am requesting her urgent admission. I'll just type that in. That is better. Okay. So apart from that, not so bad, not so bad. Just one or two little things that we could change to make it better. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, I forgot to check the word count. I shall do so now. 208, very good. Okay, what do we have here? Urgently refer, I mean, if 8-year-old girls. Right, now why would this be separate in a separate clause? You would probably, wouldn't you want to put that after Amina, her name? I'm writing to urgently refer Amina, aged 8, for your further investigation and treatment, whose features are suggested. So that is better. Instead of having that as a separate clause, I would just put it immediately after her name. Yeah. I'm writing to urgently refer Amina, age 8, for your further investigation and treatment, whose features are suggestive of. Okay, that's good. Initially, Amina attended my clinic, complaining of fever, runny nose, loss of an appetite, loss of appetite. We don't need an article there. Mild coughing, again, we don't need an article because it's a continuous verb. It's coughing activity. It's not a singular one-off event, so we don't need a singular article. Upon examination, apart from high temperature or a high temperature, there was no remarkable finding or findings. Consequently, she was prescribed. Well, consequently, it's not a consequence of, it's something that you know, a consequence would be something that's a direct result of something else. So this is not really a direct result of something else. It's something that you did, but it's not cause and effect in the strictest terms. On review, examination 3 days later, she developed. So shouldn't this be past perfect? Because it's afterwards, yeah? On review, examination 3 days later, so the review, examination 3 days later is in the past. The continuous headache was further back in time because it happened before she returned, so that should be present perfect. She had developed a continuous headache while the previous symptoms had been worsened. Why is that passive? Had been worsened? Worsened by whom? We would say had simply worsened, not had been worsened. Why would you use that passive? The previous symptoms had worsened or were worse or had deteriorated. In addition, despite taking Participles under control, was prescribed. Okay. Now, it's recommended usually that you spell out abbreviations or acronyms first. Yeah, and then every subsequent use, you can use FBC, UFR. So you're supposed to write it out in full first, and every subsequent use, you can use an abbreviation. On today's review, today her condition has deteriorated. Okay, now, present perfect there is good, connecting past and present. Temperatures. Now, this seems to be broken down into a couple of short sentences. Temperature. Why is this a separate sentence? Why couldn't you make that part of the previous sentence? You know, simply and. Or make it a comma. The temperature for more, and you know, you could have put all this into a single sentence, make it a complex sentence with a couple of clauses. Condition has deteriorated, the temperature furthermore, and mucular papular rash have been detected. Well, have been, again, why is it passive? I mean, you detected it. Have been, why is it present perfect? Were. You can simply use simple past. Were detected. Okay, present test report, time is normal. You don't need a comma there. Why do you have a comma? No need. On provisional diagnosis, based on my provisional diagnosis, not someone else's. Okay. Yes. Provisional diagnosis for state dose was, well, that doesn't make sense. What? So that's not a complete sentence. I'm not sure what that means. Something, something else. So why is there a comma? You know, based on my provisional diagnosis of, okay, that makes a bit more a sense. Penicillin for state dose was injected. Why is this passive, passive, passive? You could do something, it's active. Was injected, was commenced. I gave her a penicillin injection. That reads better than all this passive, was injected. I'd be great if you admitted that a condition. Okay. So not too bad, not too bad. Just got to watch those articles, watch those past tense verbs. Okay. Writing to refer, Amina Ahmed. We don't really need that article. Simply urgent. Admission in the emergency pediatric unit. So, right, punctuation. So, whose relative clause usually comes after a pronoun? Well, a noun of who the relative pronoun is referring to. So this, I'm writing to refer Amina. Right, what I would do to make this grammatically sound, I would put, something like, I'm writing to request urgent admission in the emergency unit for Amina, whose signs and symptoms are. Yeah, this is a little bit long for an introductory sentence, and it's a bit complicated. It's not complicated in a good way either. There's no signs and symptoms. Yeah, so I would reword that. You've got 3 clauses. We don't need 3. Only 2 would do. So something like, I'm writing to request refer. Well, you're asking, you know, so it's a request. Urgent admission to the pediatric unit for Amina. Okay, get rid of that. Whose signs and symptoms are suggestive of meningococcal meningitis, and we don't really need this, and therefore requires further management. We know that, so we don't need that. Okay, so I just get rid of that. Urgent admission, not an urgent. Urgent and admission. We don't need an article in front of it. Urgent admission to emergency pediatric. Have I spelled that right? Pediatric. Oh, that's better. Emergency pediatric unit for Amina. A comma, relative clause, whose signs and symptoms are suggestive of meningococcal, if I've said that right, meningitis. So that's a little better now. I mean, attended the clinic with complaints of fever, running nose, might cough, and subtype, based on that, comma, based on that, viral infection or a viral infection was suspected. Advice, not countable, don't need an article. And advice to rest at home. Now, why is this, you know, pass it along with was given and she was advised, you know, right, instead of having this convoluted way of passive, you can make it a lot easier and easier for us to understand. Based on that, viral infection was diagnosed and she was advised, or her pet, well, you know, I mean, she wasn't really advised because she didn't come on her own because she's only 8. Yeah, so presumably somebody, now, right, you've got to watch this, you know, right, so here, today Amina was brought by her parents, okay. Now she's 8, right? She's 8 and she's not feeling well. Is an 8-year-old girl likely to come to the doctor on her own? No, it's not happening, right? If it's a kid, the parent or somebody brings the child to see you, right? 8, no. If for teenagers, they might go on their own, but if it's a kid, especially 8, she's not going to just come to see the doctor on her own. Usually, it's a mother because the father's usually at work. Her mother comes and she does all the talking. You might ask the kid 1 or 2 questions, but most of your questions will be directed to her mother, because that's how it works in virtually 99.9% of every single case. So you've got to be careful here, because how this seems as if she came on her own, and she probably didn't. And oh, for today though, she was brought by her parents. Now, presumably one parent came the first 2 times, but on this occasion, both parents came. So you've got to be careful here, not to give a false impression of what the situation was. And she was advised, and advice to rest at home was given. Okay, after 3 days, arrived in much worse condition, or in a, you can use an article here because condition here is countable, in a much worse condition. She had developed a persistent headache, article, a singular headache, along with previous symptoms, and her examination, along with, right, she had developed a persistent headache. So she, now how this reads is that she had developed a headache that she didn't have before, along with her previous symptoms, developed at the same time. But that's not the case. She had some symptoms and she has now also developed a headache. Yeah, so you've got to be very careful how you write this, because it's not accurately portraying what is going on. So she had developed a previous headache, as well as the previous symptoms, which were worse than the. So to make this crystal clear, I would have put previous symptoms here. So arrived in Amina presented or came with a mother. Amina arrived her previous symptoms were much worse, as well as, so mention the symptoms, the previous symptoms first, right? And then introduce the new information, the headache, which developed afterwards. And that makes it clear as to the chronology of this event, well, of this series of events. So, I mean, the much worse condition, arrived with the previous symptoms were much worse. Amina presented with, I've got, oh dear, right. Amina arrived in a much worse condition regarding her previous symptoms, or something such as that, but the previous symptoms should be mentioned there, and also she had developed, right? So that makes it clearer now as to what is going on. Okay, so her previous symptoms were worse and the headache developed afterwards. She bring up her symptom, also she developed a persistent headache. So I would also persistent headache. So I would end that sentence there, right? And I would begin new sentence. Her examination, yeah? So this is what I would have done. I would have changed that around. So put previous symptoms in the first part of the sentence, end it there, then move on to new information in the second sentence. Her examination revealed a fever in the neck and stiffness, and make that a secondary clause. I prescribed her blah, 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 yeah? So 2 sentences in total, and that makes it better. Okay, it was brought by parents who were quite anxious, brought by both parents because one came before, quite anxious, had vomited twice the previous night or last night. So either last night or the previous night. Yeah, I think the previous night is better because when you're reporting, the viewpoint changes. Previous night, headache has worsened, and the headache was worse. And vomited the night, headache has worsened. She was lethargic and listless, as per my assessment. Kindly grant her. Kindly, as opposed to unkindly. You don't have to say that. Just say, therefore, I request you admit her urgently. And we don't need an article in front of urgent admission. Don't need it. It's not countable, really. So I would change that. I wouldn't use that article. Kindly, I wouldn't use that either. Kindly grant her. You're not granting, you're not a king who grants a favor. That's what a grant is, you know. So you're just asking, can you admit her urgently? That's it. They're not doing you a personal favor. They're doing their job. So they don't have to grant her an audience. They are not a monarch. And just say, can you admit her? I request that. Okay. So not too bad. A couple of sentences, as I say, need a bit of reworking. So you can see them there. And I'll post this file a bit later. Now, 7 minutes, we've got time. Let's see. Amina Ahmed, urgent hospital, don't need the article. Urgently request hospital admission writing to request urgent hospital admission of Amina, whose features are consistent. Okay. Presented with mobile signs and symptoms without infection. Okay. All of her examination was unremarkable apart from increased pulse, high fever. I prescribed paracetamol, advised her to rest. Okay, that's good. Condition had not improved. She returned with a mother with deteriorated symptoms of coughing and headaches and had no appetite. Upon examination, surely exemption means when you take something out. Like I'm exempt from paying tax. Exemption, not the same thing. She was feverish, but there was no rash or neck stiffness. Mother reported that despite your paternal was not controlled, this in mind, there were some tests. They reported the father had vomited twice, past perfect, had vomited twice last night, and developed or suffered severe headaches. Either one of those verbs, you could probably use several verbs. Increased white cell count, but urinary function test or her urinary function test was normal. Clinical findings, the pulse rate, I believe medical science, so I started medicine, okay. In view of the above, we'll be grateful urgently admit this patient, blah, blah, blah. Okay, not so bad, not so bad, not so bad. Okay, let's see what else we've got. Writing to refer Amina. Okay, but it does say urgent admission. It's urgent. Emergency. You're not simply, oh, I'm writing to refer Amina. Your prompt for management. Well, it says emergency, urgent, not, you know, if you can, if you've got time. She wants to come in now. So I would include those two verbs, urgent, emergency. Make sure that you put that in your introduction. Okay, presented with viral infection with a viral infection like symptoms. So the symptoms are plural, so don't need that. Viral infection like symptoms such as fever, runny nose and mild coughing. On examination, not fever, no other remarkable findings. 3 days later, symptoms and signs. For collocation, we always say signs and symptoms. It's like, right, a collocation is when you've got 2 or 3 words that are always used in a particular way. For example, we don't say chips and fish. We always say fish and chips. We don't say symptoms and signs. We always say signs and symptoms. It's collocation. So, and whose signs and symptoms? Hers. And why so? Not only did not improve, but also got worsened. So you mean they got worse? There's no need to say, oh, she didn't get better. In fact, she got worse. You know, not required. Simply say, oh, her signs and symptoms had worsened. All right. That's better. Conservative as opposed to liberal, as opposed to communist. What is conservative treatments? What is that exactly? She was unwell, persistent headaches, untreatable fever with paracetamol. Untreatable fever with, so her fever was not controlled by paracetamol, or it was not cured by a paracetamol, because that doesn't mean quite the same thing. Okay, on examination of the fever about next to the last result, I to test and ibuprofen as required. Fever and a fever which was untreatable with paracetamol. Okay, so that adjective needs to move. Today's visit lab test results showed hi, WBC. Spell it out. Don't write abbreviations. 2 episodes of vomiting were added to the symptoms. Worth noting. Oops. Which he doesn't have any history of allergy, and that's worth noting because single dose penicillin and requested you to admit urgently. Okay, not too bad, not too bad. Just watch your phrasing. Now, we've only got a minute left, so I'm not going to have time to look at this final letter. Only got a minute. So, in summary then, most of these are not too bad. 1 or 2 need a bit of rephrasing, reworking, couple of sentences, watch your articles. So I'm going to save these now. I'm going to put them in the class library on Easy Class, and I'll be on Telegram for a while after this. If you've got any questions, you can ask them there. And I'll post the video on YouTube in a while. So I'll see you on Telegram.